Audience segmentation is probably the most important thing you will ever do as a digital marketer creating a strategy for a brand. There are a few reasons for this. The first is that people are straight up conditioned to have personalized content delivered to them. The fact that we spend the majority of our time on social media platforms and on the internet, all of which collect personal data points around us, means that brands have had this accelerated increasing capacity to deliver personalized content based on that data. So people are conditioned to expect it. The first time that you send an email or that you do some kind of direct outreach or that you have a social media post that falls flat, that doesn't feel relevant to your target audience, is when people tune out. And if you've been in digital marketing for more than 6 months, you know that you don't get a second chance, right? People become disengaged with your brand if they feel your content is not relevant. So it's a big problem, right? So how to overcome it? You overcome it by doing an audience segmentation analysis, by figuring out not just who are we talking to singular, but who are the cohorts or the groups of people that we are talking to as a brand. I have never encountered a brand that has only one audience, that has only one type of possible buyer. And if you do at the beginning, if the brand grows, you won't. You will expand your target audiences, and this is a good thing. And as a digital marketing professional, it is an incredibly powerful tool to learn how to create tailor-made messaging, but it all starts with the research and analysis. What I'm going to walk you through today is an audience segmentation workshop. It's one of the top 3 workshops I ever do when I'm onboarding a new brand into hire a writer, when I'm onboarding into a company as a consultant. I want to know the who. And even if they've done this before, this is an exercise that has to be done routinely because the audience changes. As new products get launched, as the business grows, as the model shifts, as the market shifts, your audience changes. And you need to be consistently aware and keenly tuned in to who your audience is and how you can best communicate to them. I'm Joy Yule. I'm the founder of Hire a Writer, a copywriting agency, of Baby Got Backlink, an SEO backlink agency, and I'm also a content consultant and coach. So I am going to walk you through this today. This is an audience segmentation workshop. I also have a link to it. I'm just going to give it to you. You want it? Take it, right? Rip it off. I don't care. Copy it, paste it, use it. The goal is that these kind of good ideas get out into the real world. For those of us who are passionate about honing this craft, like let's work together, right? So in favor of community over competition, feel free. So I'm going to put the link to that in the caption below. Feel free to subscribe to my channel. I put up content like this all the time. A lot of my content is about copywriting, content, messaging, strategy, and all of the above. All right, so let's dive into the audience segmentation workshop. So I'm actually going to show this to you, and we're going to work through it together. I'm going to talk you through it just like I would if you were a client, because I think that's going to be the most helpful for you. So essentially what I would do if I were you, I would sit down on a Zoom probably with the stakeholders. And actually, let's talk about that for 2 seconds before we dive in. Stakeholders. Who needs to be on this audience segmentation workshop call? I am very, very passionate about this because I think that there are certain voices that have answers to the questions we're about to dive into that you need to have on that call. The first is leadership. You have to have people in leadership who understand what this means to segment your audience, because if you don't, when you go ask to have 3 times as many blogs created, when you go to ask to pay a copywriter to develop all of these different emails for all these different customized workflows, you need to have a justification for that, right? You need leadership to buy into the idea that we're talking to different people, and the more specific we can get, meaning we allocate resources toward creating content specifically for these segments of our audience, the more success we will have. I always want somebody in leadership. Marketing professionals. I want the CMO, I want the marketing director, I want anybody who's going to be creating content for the brand. Now, there is a tipping point. You don't want more than 6 people on this call, probably, right? Because you'll only have 2 of them talk, and then the rest are just kind of left listening, and they could do that on a recording. So, think carefully. You don't want to get crazy with how many people come to this call, but I want at least somebody in leadership, somebody in marketing, and then last, I want somebody from sales. I want somebody who's been in the real world, on the ground, having these kinds of sales conversations. There are a lot of answers that they have about some of the components we're going to talk through, value drivers, pain points, things like that, that they are the only ones who kind of hold the keys to that information. The silos between business development and marketing and sales have to come down. And audience segmentation and this workshop and this kind of conversation is a really good opportunity to begin to diminish that and set some precedent for the fact that information sharing helps all of us, right? So that I want those people on the call. So those are your stakeholders. Those are the people who you should be sitting down and having this call with. All right, so let's dive back in. So I do this straight up on a spreadsheet. I don't need it to be fancy pants. I don't need it to be super designed. It's really quite straightforward. And what I'll always do is I'll, have the client name up at the top, and then I'll essentially introduce them to the concept. Okay, what we're gonna do today is we're gonna sit down and go through an audience segmentation analysis. We are gonna figure out who are all of the different kinds of audiences that you're talking to. As you've gone through sales and as you've built this business, you obviously understand there are different types of people who are responding to content, and the more specific we can get, we know the data, the research tells us we'll have a better return, right? It will impact revenue positively. You want to make sure as you're going through this pitch, even introducing the concept, that you're smart about how you do that, because think about it. I just described 3 different audience segments, right? You got your leadership, you got your marketing team, and you got your sales team. They all have different priorities and value drivers. So make sure that you kind of present this in a way that appeals to all of them. All right. So then we kind of start to talk through, all right, what do you think are the big buckets, right? Do you have a B2B audience and a B2C audience? Do you have audiences in different industries, right? So maybe it's a transportation and logistics company. You've obviously got 2 very different scenarios there, right? Transportation, logistics, maybe supply chain. So think through kind of at the highest possible level, what is the demarcation that would lead you to say, in the market, these segments are just different. They operate fundamentally different ways, okay? That's kind of your highest level. I can show you an example here of a client that we did this for. And basically, they've got 3 big buckets. They have a B2C product that they sell to. They've got a B2C, B2B, right? So they've got a certain service that can kind of overlap those 2, and then they've got strictly B2B. So we kind of went there and differentiated them that way. So you'll talk that through. You'll ask open-ended questions. You'll prompt. They'll kind of talk amongst themselves, make some decisions. Now, don't hold up the process of this workshop with the decision like that, because they might be like, we don't know. Okay, cool. Let's keep going. Okay, so don't get caught up in the minutia of what you call stuff or anything like that. And I'll talk in a second about another piece of minutia not to get caught up in, which is demographics. But so big segments, right? Then you kind of break it down. So a lot of times the segment category or categorization right below that kind of big overarching, this is the market, is products. So think about what they sell. So do they sell one product? Do they sell 3 big products? Do they have like these kind of specific verticals that they're operating in? Okay, so that's kind of the next big level, and that's more like internal. So big overarching segments is like external. This is how these people operate in the real world. Then right below that is kind of the internal. Like, how do we transact? How do we transact in the market? What are we selling, and what are kind of the big buckets of that? It may be that they sell services to specific types of companies. That could possibly qualify as a segment, okay? It may be that they sell into different industries. So maybe it's a franchise organization, or maybe it's an educational organization that sells to school districts, or, things like that. So there's all these like little tiers and nuances. And this is a very important place to kind of specifically, if they haven't engaged, call in the salespeople who are on this call and say, like, all right, what do you guys think? Like, how do you kind of read it? How do you approach sales conversations differently? And begin to have that kind of meaningful conversation and think that through. Okay. So then right below that, I would start to name them. So there are some fun ways to do this. I mean, you can name them, I think, so for instance, we work with like a solar power solution company, and we've got the outdoor enthusiasts, right? The fun-filled forest family, right? Like thinking through what are kind of the segments of their audience. And these are grouped specifically by these 3 things. So I'm highlighting job title, pain points, and value drivers. Obviously, there are going to be 2 big kind of tasks from a statistical research standpoint that you're going to take care of as you go through this. And they're going to be demographics and psychographics. Demographics is the facts, right? I just said a second ago, don't get caught up on the demographics in this conversation because you can research those. I don't suggest that you research them in advance, okay? Because that's going to be leading the witness. Like you're gonna get muddled results if people like get into this workshop and they see a bunch of data. They're just going to start arguing about it. Well, actually, I think that the income bracket would be this, or actually, I think the age bracket, like that's not the point of this, right? That's Googleable. You can find that out yourself based on the decisions that they make with all the other elements, right? So the majority, 90% of this conversation needs to be about psychographics, which is behavior. How do these people behave? So we do want to know, what are their job titles so that we can target them on LinkedIn ads, right? But we also want to know what are their job titles? Where are they hanging out? And then what do they care about? So, heading into, okay, so maybe in this segment, we're really just talking to the C-suite, and maybe at this segment, it's the director level, and maybe at this segment, it's actually like a consumer audience, okay? So thinking through who are the decision makers, again, sales is really useful in this, who actually buys, who actually schedules a discovery call with you, a different person usually than who actually buys. So think through kind of how you would differentiate those and put some job titles against them. It's going to be super important for the actual tactical of targeting the segments that you decide on. And then think about pain points. So as we all know, pain points are super important in our world of content and communication because people, I turned the back on, because what keeps people up at night is what you need to know, right? It's what you need to know to be successful as a marketer, as a salesperson, as a spouse, as a parent. Like, you need to know what matters to somebody, right? One of the companies that I work with called Aslan is a really, really, really good sales training company, and they talk about what's on their whiteboard. So what do they care about? What is on their to-do list? What bothers them? What's challenging? It's very, very important to get to that. And I would suggest to you that this is going to help you decide, are these the same segment or are these different segments, right? So maybe the C-suite has a concern that's completely revenue oriented, and then maybe the manager level has a huge personnel problem. Or, you're going to figure out really quickly, are these legitimately, right? So like a validation point, are these legitimately two different groups? Or can we actually talk to them the same? Actually, they all just care about revenue at the end of the day. Or actually, they're all just kept up at night by the lack of this organizational tool in their company, right? So you'll kind of start to you'll start to shape it as you go and build some conclusions into that process. And then the flip side. So if you've done much marketing in your life, you know that the flip side of a pain point is a value driver. It is very, very important that you start to put together some statements and some decisions that will indicate what the value drivers will be, because the value drivers are the positive reason people buy. Okay, so if what keeps me up at night is that the Great Resignation, and I'm terrified that I'm not going to find qualified talent, and the future of my business depends on finding qualified talent, then if you are, an HR, let's say you're a coding vetting company, right, and you help companies vet coding talent or developer talent or something like that, and their big need is to vet tech talent and to build a tech team for their future of their company, right? Then what you would do, the pain point would be, it's incredibly impossible to source and then vet the kind of talent that they need. The value driver would be, we provide that, right? We have the world's leading tool for vetting, technical talent, and a marketplace for people to find each other and connect, right? I'm just making all this up. The point is, you kind of go through the pain point, like what sucks, what's awful, and then you go through the value driver, like what, and that's personal to the company, right? So that's unique to the company. What do we do that nobody else does? What do we do that's better than what anybody else does? And then you start to kind of tease through that and become clear on pain points, value drivers. Again, this is going to be like a validation metric to say, okay, we were right in segmenting like this. Our assumption at the very beginning that we would segment this way was correct. Or actually, these people have the same exact value drivers, right? They want the same exact thing, and there isn't really that big of a difference. In which case, you may go back to the beginning and say, we're going to smush these back together, okay? A lot of conversations need to happen. So open-ended questions. I would suggest to you, if you're facilitating a workshop like this, make sure you're paying attention to every single person on the call and encouraging equal input. There's always going to be two people who talk more than everybody else, right? Especially if you have people at varying levels of authority in the company, right? There's going to be unique dynamics there. It's your job to kind of wrangle all the right conclusions out of the right people, because doing so through every single piece of this conversation is what's going to get you consensus. And like I said at the very beginning, no CEO is going to sign off on some giant marketing plan that delivers all this customized content to people, which is costly, unless he or she understands the reasoning behind it, right? We went through this exercise. We realized these people want to be talked to in this way. And so we need to customize their journey. We need to customize content delivered directly to them. Okay. So hopefully that all makes sense so far. And then I want to go into a little bit here. If you download it in the caption, no worries. You'll just copy all this, okay? So you want to know basically the market size. This is kind of a go-to-market metric. You want to know the age range of the stakeholder. You want to know a little bit about their revenue, a little bit about their online habits, right? So these are actually some really unique ones that we do. And I think that it's really powerful. So you look at online habits, you think they're maybe often to always online, sometimes to often, or maybe rarely online, right? What systems do they use? Do they use project management tools? Do they, think about where they show up online? Because what you're going to do is you're going to start to establish not just the psychographics of themselves as humans and what they want and need, but you're going to start to establish the psychographics of them as online, as people online. How do they behave online? Because this is digital marketing. That's where we're reaching them. We're not trying to figure out whether they check their mail and are going to throw a postcard away, right? We're trying to figure out, are they going to open their inbox, right? How often are they going to open their inbox? How many chances do we have to get in their inbox before they unsubscribe to us, right? So there are a lot of very specific psychographics related to online behavior that you're trying to get here. You want to know their platform preferences. So some of this you can extrapolate from demographic research, right? If you get a very clear and not speculative, but data-based conclusion about platform use, you will be able to serve more meaningful content to different people. I have certain clients who will be on 6 to 8 different social media platforms, okay? They'll be all over the place. And we've done enough research to know with certainty this group of their audience are the only ones we're talking to on Pinterest. So guess what? Every pin we create is for that audience. It's purpose created for that audience. We know that Twitter and LinkedIn are the places they're going to reach their B2B executive audience, right? So we can tweak and adapt some of the content that we're creating so that it appeals using the pain points and using the value drivers we've already decided on. So there are really, really powerful conclusions that you can make as you start to go through some of those analyses. And then let me show you, I always put in here comparable brands. And so the competitive analysis you do for like all the other things, right? The competitive analysis you do for go-to-market, the competitive analysis you do for SEO, all these things is slightly different than the competitive analysis that you're going to do for audience segmentation. Because what you want to know is, what other brands do the people in this audience segment engage with? Okay, so this is going to help you understand what they want from you. Okay, if we knew what people wanted, we would always win. That's like the mantra of digital marketing, of any kind of marketing, right? If we knew what people wanted, we would always win. And by creating a competitive landscape in the psychographics to say with confidence, people like this interact with brands like these. Brands like these create this kind of content. Ergo, we should probably consider creating this kind of content. So this is a really helpful research-based, group consensus-driven exercise that helps you gut check some of your processes down the road. So when the CMO reads an article from Harvard Business Review, figuring out what the actual statistical reach of TikTok is, you can say with confidence either absolutely, that will probably work for us, or absolutely not. We can say with certainty our people aren't there. They don't engage with other brands on that platform. They're not Their demographics tell us they aren't there. Their psychographics tell us they're not going to be there, okay? There's an aversion to it, or they're not digital natives, or, all the myriad of reasons that you can use to kind of pad that conclusion. The conclusion has really begun here, right? You begin this conversation with the right stakeholders, and then you can say with confidence that we know what kind of content they're going to interact with. A couple other things that I just want to quickly show you, and they are these. So these are now we're diving deep into psychographics, okay? We're talking about what level of interaction do we predict. So how often are they on social media? You know that your feed is not getting shown to everybody that's following you. So how often should you be posting, right? That's kind of the ultimate conclusion of this. Or how often should you be emailing? How often do we expect them to get back with us? Salespeople will be good for this because they'll be the kind of people who say, people in this cohort will schedule a discovery call with me and never show. I know if somebody emails me with this kind of title in their email signature, I can expect to not hear back from them for 3 weeks and it won't be weird. Okay, they're going to give you some clues into how often, what level of interaction you can predict. And then based on that, based on what kind of interaction you can predict, how often do they want to hear from us? If you email a CEO every 2 days, that CEO is done. Not only are they going to unsubscribe, they're not going to like you because they're annoyed, right? They're very, very busy. They're important people, and it's exceptionally important that your brand appears to understand that, honors their time, doesn't overdo it with communication, okay? How often do they want to hear? Formats of content that will appeal to them, so video versus text, social media versus articles, things like that. And then going into topics they care about. And there is some overlap here in some of the other workshops I do with clients, which include content brainstorming. So we sit down with the sales team and the marketing team and the leadership, and we go through content. What ideas, what questions do people ask? What are people concerned about? Things like that. But you can start a light touch here because sometimes, every so often, you'll get 3/4 of the way through this exercise and you'll get down to this section. You'll be like, these audiences are like completely the same. Should we merge them? And then you'll get to topics that they care about, and it'll be like, no, they care about totally different things. These guys over here are buying because of our environmental pledge, and these guys over here are buying because of our price point, okay? So you might start to find that there are some differentiating criteria further down this exercise that re-inform kind of your initial findings. Okay, so that's a lot. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes. So and for every additional person you add to the call, think of adding like 15 to 20 minutes. So if you have 4 people on the call, you can probably get this done in an hour. If you have 6 people on the call, you probably need an hour and a half because you're going to invite people whose opinion you actually want to hear. So it's really, really important that as you're facilitating this experience, that you kind of pull those people out, right? Make sure you ask direct questions to them. Make sure you leave silence so that they can take a beat and think through things. The goal of this exercise is not necessarily to end. You're not going to end this call with every segment named, every audience part named, everything filled in perfectly. You are going to end it with some ideas, right? With a lot of really good ideas from the right people that you can then take away and fill in all the gaps. So that's when you go back and you do all your demographic research, right? You go back and you start to name things creatively so that people remember these audience segments, so that they become embedded into the lexicon and culture and narrative of the brand. So they become, yeah, that's our outdoor enthusiast group. Oh, that's a fun-filled forest family. Like there's going to be, you want them to be brain catching. You want them to be thought-provoking and help people understand what you're talking about. And then the second phase of this is really presenting it again, right, to leadership and showing it to them, saying, all right, this is kind of the outcome of our audience segmentation. It's likely there are going to be a few additional people who want to speak into it, to tweak it. This is a living, breathing document. The initial workshop is meant to catalyze this process, but you are always going to be reshaping. I would say every 6 months, revisit it. Go back with the team and say, is this still true? Are the conclusions we made still true? Has anything changed in the marketplace that has totally changed these pain points or value drivers? Because we're hanging a lot of our content production and goals and language and positioning on the conclusions we made that day, right? Make sure they maintain relevance. And so once the workshop is kind of complete, You've delivered it to the right stakeholders. They've thought it through, and they're beginning to grapple with it and live with it and let it inform strategy and tactical and all of that. The steps that you can use it for. Okay, so that's to my thought. The important part is that this isn't relegated to the theoretical. Okay, that it becomes practical as fast as possible, because it absolutely is true, and we have data to prove it, that audience segmentation will make you more money. It just will, because it's more relevant, people respond to it better, you have better open rates, you have lower bounce rates, you can build click funnels around it. There's a lot of the mechanisms of digital marketing that are driven by this process. One of the first things that I would say, and I think where most people end up just letting this live in the realm of ideas, is you don't think about how you're segmenting your audience in the real world. How are you collecting the data that's going to let you segment communication? So I made a reference to the fact that I have a client who segments out based on social media platform, right? So we've identified there's these different social media platforms. But the main digital property you have is your website. Right? So the question becomes, how do you create a segmented experience on your website? It may not be that you create your entire website as a segmented experience, but there's one place that your website absolutely has to tie back to this audience segmentation exercise, and that is on your forms. You want to make sure that you are collecting data that's going to tell you which of these segments people fall into, because that is going to give you the ability then in their customer profile, in your CRM, to say, all right, this is an ambitious educator, or this is a fun-filled forest family, or this is a, right, adventure lover, whatever. And if you collect that data at the point of entry, when somebody comes into your system, if you let them self-select, then you will always have that data and the ability to then create tags in your email system, the ability to serve ads specifically to that group, to do specials, to start creating specific newsletters, right? For all your lead magnets, you might want to put a separate sheet inside the first page of that PDF that just talks to that audience, which means you need as many landing pages as you have segments, and then you need to filter the people through those, right? So you think about all the ways in which this works in the real world, in which it makes a difference, it bears fruit on your actual marketing efforts, is very important. The final word I'll say is that how many, right? I get this question all the time. We have a huge company. We have a multi-billion-dollar mining company. How many audience segments should we have? I would suggest to you that because this is a high-level psychographic, demographic-driven process, you should not have more than 6 audience segments for any company. Now, there are organizations that have multiple companies, and it may be that for each of those multiple companies, you need different audience segmentation workshops and analyses, okay? I would also say that, for instance, I work with a lot of accounting firms. In accounting firms, they have all these different industries they work with: construction, real estate, nonprofit, okay? All these different things. Each of those probably merit their own audience segmentation analysis, because it's like having multiple companies within an organization. Think through, though, the amount of work it's going to take to actually follow through. Because again, unless you want this relegated to the realm of ideas, which you don't, you've got to think about the how. You've got to think about tactically, how many form fields can we realistically have, right? And they have to be mandatory, because you don't want orphan leads in your CRM, right? So you want to make sure that it's mandatory fields, all that. How many channels are we actually communicating on, right? So if you're posting once a week on LinkedIn and that's your entire social media strategy, your audience segmentation processes are a little challenged because you have just the limitation of volume, right? You're not reaching out that much. So how could you reach out to this many more kinds of people? That may be a strategic question about whether or not you're investing accurately in your, kind of social media profiles. Emails, how many email, tags can we have, and are we willing to follow up with, and will we have processes to do this well? It may be that you need to start with 3 audience segments, and then as your business grows, you progress, you start to branch off. As you get more mature in your digital marketing strategy and processes, you may be able to afford to go deeper in this process. And I assure you that going deeper will work. People want personalized content. They get retargeted all the time, and they think, how did they know I was just looking for that? It doesn't occur to them that they're living their life trading data for digital experiences, but they are. And as they do, there's a way for us as digital marketers and as people leading the marketing function in an organization to graciously and kindly create pathways for them to find what they're looking for more easily, to reach them, to speak in their language, to feel personal and relatable, and that is important. I know this was like drinking from a fire hose. So in the caption, like I said, there is a link to a landing page, I think, that has this template. I don't care. Steal it, rip it off, copy, paste it, use it. Let it be valuable to you. I assure you it has been to me. And subscribe to my channel. Maybe that's the trade-off for you taking the workshop. And I've got tons of videos that will help you learn how to streamline communications, that will teach you how to do deep work, how to go deep with your digital marketing, how to get better, how to refine your processes so that you get the results that you want.